Good evening, my name is Adi and I'm very happy to be here. Imagine a familiar object from your home. Have you ever wondered what makes it a chair, a box, a bowl, a hat? The answer seems easy because we know how it is supposed to be used. Designers provide a selection of sensory cues necessary for the immediate interpretation for an object. Either by form, material, or technology, designers create signs that contribute the social cultural construction. When they do it in mass, they create relationships between the signs that increasing their potential to become iconic. With those assumptions, I would like to begin my lecture. For a period of 5 years, Israeli industrial designer Yaacov Kaufman designed and created almost 500 different representations of stools, aiming to understand what defines a stool. Today, I will present his creative research and try to expose the values of his particular methodology. It is not always about seats. Kaufman works with a never-ending, repetitive, systematic, organized methodology to explore different everyday objects and concepts. For example, are the figurines, noisemakers, bows, cycles, and more. I argue that the features of Kaufman's industrialized work, the repetitive nature, pace, and the massive number of units produced like an assembly line contribute to his practice of characterization as a methodology. While walking through craft practices, he examines and presents various issues through the artifacts' visual language, articulating the designer's ability to change users' perception of everyday object. Yaacov Kaufman is a leading industrial designer working and living in Israel who is rich and diverse body of work is central to the local field. Alongside the mass-produced objects he designs, Kaufman is a skilled craftsman, and his commercial industrial work reflects his craftsmanship, while his craft reflects his products. Between 2010 and 2015, Kaufman designed 486 representations of stool on one-on-one scale, all intended for sitting, a self-research through the act of design. An evening sketch at home becomes a stool on the following day. Starting with the dictionary definitions of the object, Hebrew and English ones, which are not the same, by the way, he moves from concept to craft to industry and back again. Kaufman's creative research represents wisdom that lies in the act of creating itself. He basically thinks through his hands, using craft practices to produce a massive number of artifacts in a way I claim that is reserved for industrial designers only. If we examine this massive area of stools as an index of data, we discover issues such as the origin of the act of sitting, the history of design, woodworking, or Israeli culture and material culture. For example, a group of 30 stools represent various expressions of the Bauhaus familiar concept of form follows function through the idea of geometric lock, in which a structure holds itself without external joints. What affords also a very lightweight stools. At the same time, several stools have some visual characteristic reminiscent of the darbuka drum, a site common in Old Jaffa, where Kaufman's studio is located. We used to think about craft as a general term for various handmade activities and one of artifacts, and as the opposite of industry, mainly because of historical developments. For the last 20 years, craft practice has played a considerable role in practice-led design research, especially as the subject and the engine for theoretical inquiry. And to continue that, I would like to adopt Glenn Adamson's contemporary approach about craft and argues that craft is a concept of modernity and refuses to place it against the industry because, and I quote, "The two were created alongside one another. each defined against the other through constant juxtaposition. And I can say that the same with Kaufman's practice. He works between the lines of craft and industry, and both worlds are fed by and depend on each other. Many designers create sketches and mock-ups in their practice, but it's usually on the way to the products as research for design. In this case, it is an ongoing path, core experiences with the materials themselves as research through design. Two axes exist, but they're no linear process. It is more akin to a holistic approach. In an attempt to understand the core characteristics of the stools, the artifacts were classified in 3 steps. First, I examined the components by sorting the artifacts according to the number of legs, the nature of the seat, materials. Secondly, they were divided in 6 thematic groups. In the third stage, I chose 12 artifacts and analyzed them using semiotic tools to examine their potential as signs. This methodology enables an analysis of the multiple layers of Kaufman's practice and methodology to reveal its subjects. And in my analysis, I use Charles Sanders Peirce's sign theory to show that the designer can expand the repository of representations by adding new signs. According to the Peircean model, each sign comprises a set of 3 components: representation, which is the form of expression of the sign, the object, thing containing the content, and the interpretation, which is the meaning of the sign. And in my opinion, in case of everyday objects, the interpretation is the way we choose to use it. Peirce also points on 3 types of signs, which are the outcome of different connections between the components of the triangle: iconic, indexical, and symbolic signs. Iconic signs are most familiar. Indexical signs are based on memory from some repository that exists in our consciousness, and symbolic signs are only signs from some convention. Hence, they have loose, sometimes accidental relationship between the representation and the object. By using Peirce's sign types, the possibility of accepting new representations for the stool as a sign can be examined. The classification also made clear how craft functions as a form of technological inquiry. For example, is the new possibilities of the T-bone joint. The T-bone, associated with the arts and craft movement, is well known from Gustav Stickley's chairs. The visual language of Stickley chairs exposed their construction, effectively teaching how to build chairs quickly at home. In Kaufman's work, the simple wood joint became a study for the connection between wood and wood, while he challenged the method even further and copied the principles, combined wood with aluminium, and used round pipes and not just square shapes. This study became a family of almost 60 stools in total, showcasing the seat's aesthetic and exposing their technology. In one of the themes, Kaufman examines the concept of classic and engages with stool archetypes, beginning with traditional stools to representations far beyond them. This one on the left is the lowest of the group and has no legs. It's made of a plastic ring, a slice of sewer pipe, and concentric wave of rubber straps, which create a flexible seat. The inspiration for this tool is taken from cultures where low seating is practiced, such as Bedouin or Japanese culture. In fact, it might be initially be identified as an intermediate object, a raised chair for children, or in the opposite position, even as a basket. It is a clear example of an artifact that does not meet the definition of a stool and will be identified as such only when it stands near more pronounced representations. Therefore, we can say it is an indexical sign. And I have an opposite example. The general shape and proportions of this object on left are confirmed with the definition of stool: 4 legs, standing stable on the ground, and proportions that's suitable for sitting. However, the creative and unusual usage for the seat gives it a different identity, as a container for toys or kind of cabinet side table. Users familiar with Child's World will probably recognize the colorful pit balls that they're not connected to the wood, and that might confuse them. For them, this item isn't an indexical sign, but for an object from another context or a double context. This kind of practice is not just a local shift. For example, is the case of Italian designer Martino Gamper. His known project 100 Chairs in 100 Days becomes a practical methodology that arts and design academies adopted as a creative exercise for self-learning for their students. And I invite you to think, what happens if a lot of potential users will meet Gamper, Kaufman's, and other designers' artifacts at the museum, but as an index and not just one of? How it will change the index they have in mind about chairs? I argue that by looking at industrial designers' craft practices, researchers from both design and craft disciplines can gain new insights. For example, the combination of Kaufman's systematic practice together with the industrialized creative research points to a hybrid concept, mass craft. To be more specific, it is an individual mass craft that must be made by the same person, by one person only. And I must mention here that the term was used before in 2008, but it was used in a different context and was minor compared to a wider theory. The large number of units Kaufman creates in every research process is the result of method developed following his extensive experiences working with the industry, which required him to create many options so that one become a product. The concept of individual mass craft expands the nature of work of industrial designers and the profession of industrial design. Whereas verbal and written communication is based on linguistics, Kaufman's object-embodied practice-led research perceived through visual and practical means. Thus, the outcomes and insight of such a research are accessible and in contrast to theoretic research, not reserved for professionals alone. To conclude, Kaufman's practice showed that creative and artistic research has its own values, even if it's not recognized as a methodology in academic terms. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I demonstrated that his research operates on several simultaneous levels: design, semantic, and practice. Besides the layers of knowledge the artifacts express in the visual language, Kaufman's methodology also enables a dialogue between the designer's preliminary knowledge and the user's perception of the object. By adding new signs to the conventional inventory of signs associated with the object, he expands the scope of its definition. I believe that such a possible impact and the ability to create meaning by diving deep into a simply designed object is what makes Kaufman a researcher. Thank you very much.